Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming to our first kickoff meeting. I'm Scott Chesney. I'm with Spokane County Planning. We are at the beginning of a process of updating the county's comprehensive plan. It has been since 2001, when the county did its first plan under the Growth Management Act, which was passed by the legislature in the 90s. And that act was designed to help cities shape how they grow and try to provide for what was called compact urban growth and to use capital facilities wisely. The plan of the county has been updated every 7 years or so until now. And now we're into a 10-year cycle. We will be updating this by June of 2026. So we have some time before us, but as many of you know, with complicated projects, that time can go very quickly. So we're moving forward and getting our first chance to go out and talk with you and share with you what's going to be happening here. We've got some slides for you to go through. Now, generally, what we're going to talk about today is what is the plan? What does it do? How do you get involved? And what are some of the key elements that we will be looking at the county in these next couple of years? And just kind of up front, when I say the county, we do have some responsibilities that are independent of our cities, but a huge part of this effort is in cooperation with all of the cities and towns in the county itself, because the county's comprehensive plan is seen by the state government as the regional plan, and the county is the regional government for that plan. So all of the city and town plans need to be in conformance with the county plan. Therefore, it's better for us to do that in partnership than to do it independently. Next, please. So here's what we're going to try to accomplish today. A little bit of what we are, what is the plan, and ending with how can we be involved. Here's our county. You can some of you probably know most of this. 1,700 square miles, 13 incorporated cities and towns. The population now just about 540,000. And we're expecting in 2046 that estimate to go up to 650 or more thousand. That is an estimate made by the State Office of Financial Management, or OFM. They make these projections for all of the communities in the state, all of the counties and communities in the state, based on in-migration, natural selection, and they make a high, a medium, and a low range over that 20-year period. The county and our corresponding municipalities chose the middle ground as the safest approach to plan for that. If we grow faster than that, it's easier to accommodate that growth than it is if we overshoot and have to back off from that. And we'll tell you a little bit why as we go forward. Next, please. You can see some of the basic statistics here. The median home price, I'm sure, has all of our attention over these last 5 years or so, how that is totally shot up from where it has been before. And that will, again, in some of our future slides today, we'll be talking specifically about housing and how that is an important part of our planning to keep ourselves growing. And next, please. So the plan, as you can see, it's a guide. It helps us market Spokane County to outside folks that want to come here, want to grow here, but come to build a business, come and go to school, and do those things. It's also a guide to growth for those that are already here who, while we have really these 4 functions in our department. One is this comprehensive plan function. One is a planning and permitting function. The other is building permits themselves. And the third is code enforcement. And those all work together because while we're planning for growth and encouraging growth at the upfront side, our code compliance section is there to preserve and protect the growth that's already in place. So we're conscious of that whole continuum of growth. One key piece, you could say it says it's not legislation. Another way of thinking of that is the comprehensive plan is a guide for growth, but it is not law. The zoning code, the subdivision codes, the part of the Spokane County codes, those are the actual statutes and laws and rules that regulate growth. The comprehensive plan is a state function overseen by the Department of Commerce. You can see the map shows the different areas that have to complete this task at different years. We're on different cycles. That helps all of us. Some of the early planners, namely the Puget Sound counties, we as the one of the bigger, larger counties outside of that can learn from some of the things that they find in the world, and then some of our other counties around us. We will work with as they go into their 26, 27 aspects. So as we said, we're in the 26th cycle, which means our county board needs to act on this, and we have teed it up on their calendar for Tuesday, June 30th, 2026. Next, please. There's 15 goals that are in the Growth Management Act, in the law. You can see the first 8 here. They're fairly straightforward. Growth, sprawl, transportation, housing, economic development rights, and so on. Next, please. And then they go into things more direct, like public facilities. It includes capital facilities up front. And then notably at the end, you can see, the second one, climate change and resiliency is a new element that the legislature enacted last year. That will be something where we have to now look at growth in the focus of, is it sustainable? Is it resilient? And resiliency, especially for those of you that may have been west and north of us last summer, resiliency really comes home to roost when you talk about wildfires and wildland fires. This is a chance to do something more than just disaster mitigation planning. It's a chance to look forward at growth and say, how can we do some of this growth and minimize some of those risks from climate and other issues? Next, please. These are broken into both required and optional chapters or elements that we could do there. And you can see we're adding several that are not necessarily in there by statute, notably things like parks and recreation. While those are important, they're critically important for Spokane County. It's who we are, it's how we live. If we don't take note of our environment and our parks, our recreation, our open space, our trails, our critical areas, we're not doing our land good job. Here's how the plan all comes together. And if you think this is a very straightforward job, you can start to see the layers that come into play here from the plan and its elements, the bill, taking guidance from state law and the Growth Management Act, regional and local issues, and then dropping out of that all of the implementation parts of that, which include our development regs and our codes, as well as shoreline management, capital decisions, and things like that. The comprehensive plans for the Growth Management Act and for Spokane County are comprehensive with a big C, in that they are much more than just a land use plan. All of the county operations that deal with growth must be accounted for and addressed in this comprehensive plan. And then they go into sort of implementation plans that go into public works. The growth that leads to roads then tells the public works department what those roads need to look like, how they need to serve, and how many parks do we need, things along those lines. We also work with what are called the special districts. And those are not mandated to be part of the Growth Management Act, but they're the ones that are critical for our life in the rural areas, school districts, fire districts, and the water districts, notably. We mesh all of our work and the growth on our edges with those. Next, please. I'm going to turn this over to Joshua in a minute. Before I do, a couple other kind of things. We put up some boards on the sidebar to talk about the comprehensive plan map, our aquifer recharge areas, our stormwater areas, and our urban growth areas. These maps are based on what exists today. These are the baselines for which we'll be looking at analyzing the land use in the future. And that's what we'll be here talking with you many times over these next 2 years. So our team is here to walk you through other parts of this. Joshua's going to start. Michael's with us. Vago is behind him. Ella is our producer and driving the ship. And I'll turn it over to Vago. Oh, Joshua.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott, for that great introduction. Ella, could you go? So why does this plan necessarily matter to you? over the next 2 years, this is going to be your opportunity to tell us what your visions are, what your values are, how you see Spokane County developing over the next 20-year planning horizon. And I think what also is very important about this is that these policies will guide local development on the ground. It's going to affect not only the built environment, but also the natural environment. So we really welcome and we encourage getting as much community feedback as possible, because it really does matter. Not only will it decide what goes on the ground, this will also affect different policy decisions. The policies and goals from the comprehensive plan will be used by elected officials to help guide legislation and make those decisions. And it also will be affecting current and future generations. These land use decisions and policies will not just be affecting us, but also the people in Spokane County in the future. So it's really important that we get as much input from you guys as possible. Because when you really think about it, it's your guys' plan. We're really just stewards of this plan. And the most successful comprehensive plans are the ones we have great public involvement in. So right here we have our public participation roadmap. But not only is public participation important, under the Growth Management Act, public participation is required. We're required to have early and continuous public participation. And that's why we're starting this right now. We want to start you guys off early in this process. We get feedback from you, but also include you throughout this whole time. Now, what we recently have been working on has been the public participation program. This was created for the comprehensive plan. The public participation program essentially is a framework which helps explain to you guys how we're going to be doing public participation over the next 2 years. It's essentially a roadmap for public participation. This shows different engagement strategies, information technologies. It shows a schedule of our scope of work. It also explains, just our goals for reaching out to the public. Recently, this past been recommended by the Planning Commission. And we have this on our website, and which you can look and see different ways in which you will be involved in this process. I think one of the most important ways in which you can be involved is to join our stakeholder list. On our website, you can send us an email, and we will also give you a QR code and a website name. You can go up and sign up to be a stakeholder, so you can really be involved in this process. Each GMA element and each GMA chapter will be having public forums in which you can attend. This is a great opportunity for staff to be sharing with the public what they've been working on, and to get comments and feedback, and to really have a collaborative approach. As planners, we just don't want to stay in the office being by ourselves, not seeking public input. We want to make sure that we're including the public throughout the whole process. Again, it goes back to early and continuous public participation. And on our website, if you want the most up-to-date information on public forums and how you can get involved, we have our email sign up, which will be sending you guys emails and notifications on this. Throughout this public participation roadmap, we really see our website as the online hub for information. We are living in a digital age, and we really want to make sure that we utilize that to help reach the most amount of people possible. On our website, you'll be able to see drafts for the plans. You'll also be able to submit comments on plans, get more information about comprehensive planning and a schedule of events. We're also doing during this process, it's a really unique engagement form. We're calling them community consultations. They're not quite up yet, but in the future, you'll be able to schedule some time to go over and talk to a planner about your concerns and have us explain to you the different aspects of comprehensive planning. We would also like to do a great social media outreach to you guys. So ensuring that we're not just notifying you on the website, but different social media platforms as well. This is going to be a very important process, and we really look forward to having you join us during this time. Thank you. And then next, we're gonna get into our different specific elements. And we're gonna start with the land use element with Tom Thomas.
Hello, everyone. Well, I just got an introduction, so I'll spare you. But, yeah, let's just go on. Oh, actually, I should say. Most of the elements are being tackled by one or two specific people. Land use is unique for reasons I'll discuss, and so it's being tackled by the whole team, and as well as two of our colleagues who are unfortunately not, here today. So, yeah, the main purpose of land use is essentially the phrase I'm looking for. It is basically saying what land can and cannot be used for promoting orderly development. You know, we're trying to create orderly, efficient development. Yeah. Let's do it next. So in terms of the plan goals, we're doing looking at urban growth and the reduction of sprawl. And our main land use categories are going to be residential, commercial, industrial, mixed use, and resource lands. And those get broken down a little bit as there are subcategories of those, but for our purposes, those are the broad categories. And in terms of the importance of land use, this is one of the phrasing I want. This is one of the most overarching elements, and there are several different reasons why it's so important. It minimizes conflicts between different land uses. You know, you have an industrial area over here and you have schools over here. You know, having them next to each other is going to create issues, so we space them out to minimize that. Safe transportation, as we mentioned, the reduction of sprawl, protecting critical areas, open space, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, and then I'm going to jump right into housing. So I'm on this one as well as my colleague Tate Andre, who's unfortunately sick today. So the main purpose of the housing element is to ensure that we have enough housing, enough affordable housing for Spokane County residents through our planning horizon, which in our case is 2046. So we're going to be looking at, you know, housing types and densities, having the proper supply of affordable housing, where the housing is located, making sure people can access employment, transit, etc. And then for the planning goals, we're looking at reduction of sprawl, housing, structural accommodation. We're going to go over these a bunch, so I won't get into that. Yeah, and so this housing element is going to be the most thorough one that has ever been developed for Spokane County. And this is just owing to a host of new state laws that have come into effect. This is just a couple of them. We're going to be looking at stronger language on providing affordable housing for all income segments. I can break that down a little bit more, but basically just extremely low income, moderate, etc. We're doing an inventory of racially discriminatory policies and practices, as well as ways we can mitigate that and undo the harms that have been done there. You know, providing for missing middle housing, etc. This is just kind of a nutshell of it, but it's as I said, it's going to be the most thorough housing element. And so a lot goes into this element, too much to put on one slide, but we're going to have our population projections in our data that we're pulling from the land capacity analysis, which unfortunately my colleague who's on that is not here to speak to it today. But public outreach such as this, interagency coordination, Spokane Housing Authority, our colleagues in housing and community development, et cetera, as well as our own internal and external data analyses of these and billion other points I won't bore you with. Yeah, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Joshua to talk about transportation.
Thank you so much, Robert, for that. Right here, I'm Joshua again, and we're doing the transportation element with Tate Andre, and this will also be done in coordination with the Public Works Department. So essentially, the purpose of the transportation element is to make sure that the county has the proper financing and capacity and infrastructure to meet our future growth projections that we've been talking about. It also ensures that our transportation network is consistent with and can supply our future land use map. The transportation element provides a 20-year vision for Spokane County's transportation network. which includes our different infrastructure and financing options. I think that it's really important to demonstrate that the transportation element and the land use element are interconnected. The transportation element must ensure that we can fulfill and properly finance and has the capacity to meet our land use element without going against our level of service standards. Slide. So transportation meets three planning goals under the Washington State Growth Management. The first one is urban growth areas. We need to make sure that our transportation network can properly meet our urban growth areas without compromising our level of service standards. Now, the transportation was recently updated based off of House Bill 1181. That is the Climate and Resiliency House Bill. Essentially, now we need to be preparing for multi-modal level of service standards, which reduces greenhouse gas emissions. We also have to make sure that we're reducing vehicle miles traveled per capita. And this is done at a regional scale. And again, this has that collaboration between us as the regional county and with the different cities. And this is done by our local MPO, the Spokane Regional SRTC. And also the next planning goal that this meets is our public facilities and services. At the time of development, we need to make sure that before occupancy, that adequate transportation in our road networks are up to snuff and it will not compromise our level of service standards. Slide. And this is really a roadmap showing how the transportation element is actually implemented. We start at the comprehensive plan levels, which we take your community vision and your values into goals and policies, which is then implemented into our capital facilities plan, which shows an inventory of our capital facilities and our financing options, which goes into the transportation element of itself, which demonstrates how will we pay for this transportation corridors and networks and how this infrastructure will be done. This is further fulfilled by the transportation improvement plan. This is a list of capital projects and financing options that the county will do to meet these goals. And then even beyond that, we have our much more broad 20-year financing plan, which shows how we plan to finance these projects. And the final project that we have is that we're having an efficient transportation network that is paid for and is able to serve the county. Next slide. Next, we have the natural environment. This chapter is being done by myself and my colleague, Tate Andre. Next slide. So the natural environment is going to encompass three general ideas. It's the classification of our natural resource lands, our critical areas, and our open space. Now, these meet three very important GMA planning goals. We need to preserve and protect our natural resource lands, but that also includes, while using them, but also doing it in a sustainable way that we can use it for today's generations, but also future generations as well. Our natural resource lands are a great cultural resource for Spokane County. It's one of our unique identities. It's something that we need to make sure that we can protect. And this also includes our open space and our recreation. Use preserving open space to help preserve wildlife and fish, but also allowing it to be open to the public for trails and recreation. And lastly, protecting the natural environment. This is protecting our air and our water quality. So this chapter is usually a tool that we use to help protect and preserve and enhance these natural areas. Next. So once again, I would like to start with the natural resource slide. Natural resources under the Washington State Growth Management Act are considered your forest lands, your agricultural lands, but also your mineral lands. Again, these hold very important economic, but also cultural significance to Spokane County. And I think something that's really important that we need to know is it's very important to protect and preserve these areas Because once we lose them, it's very difficult to get these back. They're usually gone forever once they're developed. So that's something that we are taking very serious during these updates. Next. The next thing that we get to protect is our critical areas. Critical areas consider our wetlands, our critical aquifer recharge areas, but also geological hazard areas and frequently flooded areas. Now, this is done for two reasons. One, it helps prevent these areas which have important ecological functions to our county, but also helps protect our population and land use owners from potentially hazardous materials when they're doing their development. And this would be implemented in our critical areas ordinance, which we have 1 year after 2026 to update. Next slide. And also we have the importance of open space. This would be done by connecting fish and wildlife habitat areas, biologically diverse areas, and different wildlife corridors. This is valued because it helps protect Spokane County's unique wildlife, our trails and recreation, which I know is very important to the members of this community. Something that we'll take very serious during this plan. But also connecting our critical areas and our green belts. Again, we want to preserve our open space, make sure that we're allowing our specific and ecologically important wildlife to be able to be preserved and to stay here and not have any loss of ecological function. Next is rural lands, which is also being done by Tate Andre and myself. In the GMA has a very specific way in which they categorize rural lands. Rural lands in the GMA are lands that are outside of our urban growth areas, but are not being done for natural resources. They're not being done for urban growth. So it's different than our urban growth areas, which are done at more urban densities. We have our rural lands, which are done at lower densities, higher lot sizes, and these are really influenced by rural values, rural lifestyles, and rural character. In our rural areas, we understand that living in these areas is going to be a little bit different way of lifestyle than living in our urban areas, and it's reflected by them. Now, I think what we really need to understand is that our rural areas are essentially connected and interconnected to our natural environment. Our rural lands are used to preserve open space, protect the natural environment in critical areas. And we have different techniques that we use in our zoning code, such as rural clustering, which really helps preserve those lands. Next slide. Again, rural lands helps meet very specific GMA planning goals. Again, urban growth, separating our urban growth areas and our rural areas by different lot sizes and densities, and understanding the differences between that. Again, it's done by reducing sprawl. And the next two, again, is our natural resources and environment. We have a real good opportunity to make sure that our rural lands are used to protect our natural environment, ecological functions, open space, and our natural resource lands. Next slide. And the overall, what you get from this, from our rural lands, is you can preserve, to preserve their lands, but also protect our ecological functions, reducing an appropriate conversion of undeveloped lands, but also preserve our rural vision and promote sustainability and work towards creating rural economies, bringing jobs to rural areas and bringing industries to rural areas as well. So that would be concluding the rural element. And next, I would like to bring it up to the next planner, which would be Michael Weir. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Weir. I'd like to thank everybody for making it out here today and learning a little bit about the comprehensive plan process with us. So you might be wondering, what are capital facilities? Capital facilities are really the things that build our environment and the things we interact with every day, and a lot of the services that we love to enjoy. It includes streets and sidewalks, traffic signals, a lot of that road infrastructure, stormwater, sewer, parks and recreation, schools, fire districts, the law enforcement, And these can be not only publicly owned, but they can also be privately owned and also special districts. So a lot of the water districts here in Spokane are special districts, not necessarily owned by the county. The city is one of those that actually owns water. So what are the planning goals for capital facilities? So the first one is urban growth, and that's really all about encouraging that development to occur where the facilities are already available, because that's really just the most efficient way to go about providing those capital facilities, and designating the growth where the facilities are already available. So we don't have to completely build out new facilities to serve small populations. The other one is ensuring that they're provided adequately. So that is making sure that they're provided at the time of development, and that we can maintain the levels of service that we've established so that they don't fall below those minimum level of service standards that we have. So how does this all kind of play out? It can kind of get a little confusing because there's a lot of different moving parts in capital facilities and how we invest in those. So the first one's the comprehensive plan, and that really sets the vision that we have for capital facilities and how they serve you, the public. And then it also sets out the framework of that intended growth. So we have to look at where we establish that growth to occur. We need to ensure that the public facilities are going to be there to serve the people. That plays into the capital facilities plan, which is a separate plan, but it is associated with the comprehensive plan because they kind of go hand in hand, and it really is a summarized version of how we're going to fulfill making those capital facilities and maintaining them. So the first one is an implementation tool, the comp plan. So as we look at the comprehensive plan where we want to grow, the capital facilities plan will address what is needed to serve the public in those areas. The levels of service is an established measurement that we use to ensure that we're providing it adequately to the public. So an example might be police officers per 1,000 residents is a measurement. Another one could be square footage of educational space for students based on a certain amount for that population. So it really influences those capital investment decisions and growth patterns because they kind of go hand in hand. And as our leadership looks at these growth patterns, they have to look at the capital facilities plan and say, okay, we know we needed to provide these capital facilities to serve this population. So it really will follow that growth. A few of the GMA requirements for that plan is the inventory providing location and capacity. So we do an inventory at the beginning of this process to look at where we currently at with inventory. It really is a good measurement for what we can take on. The forecast of future needs, so that is, we do an analysis of looking at the future forecast based on that population growth of what we're going to need, and we work with the other departments to highlight those needs of those areas we're intending to grow. The proposed location and capacity of new and expanded facilities. So as we have these investment projects, we're going to look at, okay, how much is that really going to increase our capacity? If we build a whole other school or the fire district gets another fire truck, are they able to serve the community and maintain those adequate levels of service that we're establishing? The 6-year finance plan, really important. How are we going to pay for it? So you have to prove that you're going to be able to provide these and finance these projects. Otherwise, can you actually grow into those areas if you can't provide the road infrastructure, the sewer, the water? And then GMA also requires a reassessment. So if the probable funding falls short of meeting our expectations, we have to do a reassessment of those areas. So maybe a grant fell through or the funding was pulled. We would need to then go back to that area and say, okay, do we need to shrink the zoning or take away that density in that area so that we can serve that area? Another method is lowering that level of service standard. So you might be lowering water flow, but still within a certain measurement. That's hopefully not what you would, your first alternative. And then how is this all implemented? So each department kind of has their own plan, but it's based off that CFP and that comprehensive plan. So it's kind of a trickle down. And those department facility plans kind of focus on their own analysis that they've done provided by our comprehensive plan and capital facilities plan, and highlight those big projects that are going to be needed and really tell the story of how they're gonna get it done. The capital improvement program, the CIP, is how are we gonna pay for those projects or what gets selected? So every year, the Board of County Commissioners will look at the CIP and they select these projects and how they're gonna invest in these infrastructure projects to maintain that level of service. Another, the development requirements is more of a day-to-day operation that we do. So it's concurrency requirements. So it might be a developer wanting to build out a certain area. We may have that developer build out the sewer or provide a park. So the result of all of this, when it is put out and works good, is you're provided with the adequate facilities and services that we've established, and we maintain those levels of service. So Parks and Recreation, this is another really important topic. Open space and recreation. The main goal of the GMA is that open space, enhance that recreation opportunities, enhance fish and wildlife habitat, and really increasing the natural resource and protecting them as well. And then building out on that and representing what the public wants and maintaining that level of service. So implementation and consistency with the capital facilities plan is a requirement, a 10-year Parks and Recreation demand estimate, the evaluation of facilities and service needs, evaluation of tree canopy coverage within the urban growth area, that's the new one. And then identifying intergovernmental coordination opportunities. That might be partnering with another jurisdiction nearby to meet that level of service requirements that may partner on, buying the lands to build a park and serve that community in that area. So it's very similar to the transportation element and ties into the whole capital facilities element as well. So that comprehensive plan is where we're going to set the general goals and policies of Parks and Recreation. So we're going to grab your vision, what you want to see for Parks and Recreation, and we're going to put that in the comprehensive plan. The trickle down with the capital facilities plan, we'll look at those level of service standards that we establish. We do an analysis, ensure that we're meeting that. And then the Parks Department actually makes their own parks plan with reference to the capital facilities plan and that comprehensive plan. And that really gets down to the nitty-gritty fine details of how are we going to accomplish this? How are we going to serve the public? So they do a demands and needs analysis. They define those goals and objectives even further and how they're going to meet them. They do park projects and establish those. They provide a detailed park inventory. So they go even a step further than the capital facilities plan might in the inventory. They might look at a number of baseball fields and other recreational activities. And then they identify those funding sources of how they're going to pay for it, because it's very important. You got to establish how you're going to pay for these projects before you can say, well, we're going to grow out here. You know, the money's not there, it ain't going to happen. So capital improvement plan, that CIP again, this is where the parks are going to be built out. It's where you're going to see the projects happen. And so those happen at the end of every year. And as those parks are selected, they'll get built out and funded and get them. And then I will go ahead and pass this on to back to Scott for economic development.
Thanks, everybody. I'm pinch hitting today for part of our staff. Most people are concerned about economic development. It's how we grow our economy. It's how we provide quality of life. It's how we provide goods and services. And so what we do in the economic development element is going to be a little different from what's been done in the past. Many of you probably know the group Greater Spokane Incorporated as our Chamber of Commerce and Area Development Organization. Their job is economic development on a small scale and a large scale. The counties and the cities tend to play a smaller role in that. But GSI tends to be focused on bigger projects. And one of the things that we need to do in our economic development program, next slide, is make sure we're creating the right regulatory systems, the right incentive systems to bring people into the county and provide this as a good place to invest. It's not an easy thing to do. Economic development competes with areas all over. So one of the challenges we've got is to look at what are the assets that we have here. In past work, I've used something that we call place-based assets. What do we have that's here that we can build an economic model around? That might be something different than another county or another place. If we could identify those opportunities, that gives us a leg up on going after businesses and things that fit those. So we're going to create a strategy that fits all of our normal goals, but takes a little bit different perspective beyond that, what an area development organization might do. And I'm going to continue on with this one. This is the new requirement from the Growth Management Act. It is looking at two different things. One is the greenhouse gas emissions, the other is climate resiliency. We're looking at doing this in a also kind of a unique way. Spokane County has offered, and most of the smaller cities and towns have agreed to participate in this as a team. So we are pooling our resources and being able to work with all of our, essentially everybody outside of the metro core area that will be working under the county umbrella to work on these things. We think that's important for one obvious thing. Greenhouse gases, other gases, climate resiliency, reduced vehicle miles traveled is not something that stops at the municipal boundary very well. And the smaller cities, they are generally not equipped with professional staff. And it's expensive for them to hire consultants separately, so we think we could be a good partner by bringing them into the umbrella. Next, please. This is going to be a new task for everybody in the state. We're going to have to look at where these things are going and how they're going to affect Spokane County. Again, going back to the Gray and the elk fires. Yeah, we've never seen anything like that around here. Is there part of our planning that could help anticipate that or make us more resilient when those things are happening? So those will be kind of some interesting things that we should be looking at next week. And then reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled. This is a challenge for pretty much every county east of the Cascade Bridge. We don't have a train system like the Puget Sound counties. We don't have a light rail system. We don't have an intercity bus system. And so we exist to a large degree in our vehicles. To the degree that Spokane Transit Authority can expand its system within the metro core and in us working with them to help broaden their service out into the urban growth area in an unincorporated county, we can start to address some of this, but it will be sort of a challenge to do this in a very traditional way. One of the ideas though that we're pursuing is the smaller towns that have to make frequent trips into the metro area. If you're out at Four Lakes and you've got to drive to Rosauers downtown to get milk, that's kind of a silly thing to do. If we could find ways of providing more services and amenities in and near our smaller areas, we can, in our belief, we can help their quality of life as well as reduce some of those miles traveled on the highway. So this is going to be a really wide open element for us to be studied. That said, we also will be looking at this from a scientific perspective. We will be measuring greenhouse gases. We've got state partners to do that. We will be looking at the chemistry and the air quality and things around Spokane County. And so at the end of this, we'll have a pretty good roadmap for everybody here to say, here's where we are, and here's how we compare to other areas. And maybe here are some ideas that we can still pursue that keep or enhance our quality of life, but then reduce some of these environmental issues. Thanks. You can see some of the challenges with even the heat map in terms of urban heat islands and things like that. This is something that we've all sort of experienced in various places. Those of us that have lived in other areas, in the South particularly, Phoenix, Florida, or Texas, have known how the climate has changed over our lifetimes in those areas. And so it's a measure of balancing how we grow with that quality of life. We think Spokane County has a huge sweet spot in this. We're not too hot, we're not too cold, we're not too windy, we're outside of a tornado zone, we're sort of away from the earthquake zone. So we've got a lot going for us here that I think gives us a lot of flexibility in attacking this element. Thanks. And Here you can see the results, these are the reports that'll come up in our plan. So where are we? We are in the second quarter of 24. We're beginning this public participation. We will be working through all that in the year in at least a multi-part track. One part is this public participation group, where, as we noted before, Joshua, there will be stakeholders. There will be climate advisory teams or housing advisory teams being put together with people that want to spend more time involved in those discussions. We will facilitate those. And then at the other time, the technical planning staff will be working on all of those interconnected elements that Michael alluded to in capital facilities and parks and other things. We have what's called the Planning Technical Advisory Committee, which consists of the professional planning staff of all of the communities in the county. And that meets once a month to go over this on a countywide level and individual level. So we have a huge collaborative advantage over a lot of places that we all talk to each other. We know what's going on next door and we're trying to be complementary in making that happen. So that will happen through this year and next year. And in that time, we'll be rolling out some interim reports. And then we would expect to have something that resembles a final draft toward the end of 25. And then as we wrap into 2026, we'll be taking, in a sense, taking that final draft out for a test drive. Did we meet your expectations? Does it meet state expectations and regulatory expectations? And then with any luck at all, we will be in the commissioner's hearing room on the 30th of June to make that affirmation. The other group, by the way, that's deeply involved in this is our planning commission. They are really the tip of the spear. They will be holding the public hearings on this. They will be the place where you will have the best chance for formal public input at those hearings. It's recorded and put into our documents. And then their recommendations along the line will go to their board of commissioners. Yeah. Technology sometimes gets the best of us. That's supposed to be a QR code. So, in the meantime, we'll also make sure that you can get to us through our website, which if you aren't familiar, is the county's website and the building and planning section, or SpokaneCounty.org/BP. That'll take you right to our site. There's a comp plan button on that, where you can get information, you can leave us your name, and you can say, I want to know more about these things, and sign up. This group will be contacting you from those specific elements if you have those interests, and we'll be working as we go forward. We're going to be doing this similar session in 6 other places over the next 4 or 5 weeks. And then we'll start wrapping into some of the more direct element sessions and, as we said, land use, housing, transportation, those that may be specific interests to some of you. And that work will start wrapping up here in the next 30 days or so. So with that, we would love to take any questions or comments that you may have today. And thanks for attending. Yes.
I have 2. One is when you talked about the parks plan, is there public outreach where you be simultaneous with what you're doing here with the comprehensive plan of things here? That's going to go.
Yes, we will be coordinating that as best we can. They have some specific things they want to talk about, like some specific parks, for example, how you program a park that is downstream from what we want to do. But as we talk to them, it's more of how do these parks connect? They're talking about parks, and we put a trails layer on top of that, and we put an environmental corridor layer on top of that to make these things happen. So we will have those conversations simultaneously to the best of our ability.
So if we're signed up for this, then we would know what the parks plan activity related to parks.
I would advise you to be safe to also connect with the Parks Department. We will pass that information along as we are convening meetings that involve the parks. But if they're doing something for a specific facility or a specific area, that our list won't necessarily overlap.
And my other question is, The siting of solar and wind, will that be in the industrial area or what's your thinking about that?
That's a very good question. Right now, the county, Spokane County's code does not have really any direction for industrial scale energy, renewable energy, wind or solar. We are looking at an interim ordinance that might give the county a chance to participate in those discussions at the state level and with energy companies that we have met with several. We know they're talking to landowners. We know they're going so far as to sign preliminary leases for land on wind and things like that. So the county needs to get into the game. We would expect to be bringing some of that ordinance to our planning commission in the next 30 days or so, and then have a discussion with our county boards. That's more of a, I don't want to say emergency, but that's a short-term project. In the longer-term comprehensive plan, this climate and energy and resilience will take into account industrial scale energy. One of the challenges we see, and on that second map are our resource areas back there, the large tract ag, small tract ag, forest areas. We need to protect those ag areas from being covered up by solar panels as much as we want renewable energy. We have to balance those land uses to do that. And right now we don't have the tools to do that. So we're studying that, and then we're going to be having that set of discussions and hearings, like I said, the next 30, 60, 90 days. Yes, sir.
Are you targeting any specific areas that are more appealing to expand, like west, south, north, or is it gonna be some kind of implementation where the whole circle gets bigger?
There's no targeting yet. The last map over here shows our existing urban growth areas and the urban reserve areas, which is where our predecessors 20 years ago thought we would be growing after 2021. However, we are studying those. One of the slides you saw earlier had something called the land capacity analysis. That's something that we are doing at the county and all of the cities are doing. What it is look based on that urban growth area and 20 years of growth, what do we have left for developable land? Once we know that, and then we have this population forecast, we can balance the two and say, we don't have enough land to accommodate 100,000 more people, so we're going to have to grow. That's when the shaping of the land starts to take place. It will be based on capital facilities, it'll be based on pieces that are there. And so it's not necessarily, it's likely that most of the growth will be in the metro core, but Medical Lake, Cheney, Deer Park all want to grow, and so we're working with them to grow into their own urban growth areas as well. But there's no target areas or there's no study areas yet. Those will start to become known probably in the last quarter of this year.
And some of that probably based on existing infrastructure, sewer, water.
Significant part. Yes, ma'am.
Would you repeat the website you gave them a video about?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
You said it was .org/BP.
Oh, SpokaneCounty.org/BP for building and planning.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm a graduate of 30 years of election process, 1990 urban growth onward. For 30 years, they've ignored all the orchards, the landfill, adjacent to Liberty Lake. It's the most served area and the least developed. Is there some specific interest in that area?
We have no specific interest per se, and we have not heard of any specific interest from outside sources. We will be studying this go around of the comprehensive plan is going to start almost with a clean sheet of paper. We're going to be studying every part of the county for the first time since 2001. So if there are interests or concerns from you and your neighbors in Otis Orchards, we would love to hear about them. Yeah, there's some urban growth area in proximity to that, especially just on north of the river from Liberty Lake. That's in the urban reserve area. But again, there's been no specific target or interest.
Is that universal everywhere? When you say no specific target, is there no target, let's say on the north end or council.
That's correct. We have received letters of interest from a number of landowners that say we would like to be considered for inclusion in the urban growth area. We can't accept applications for that because of the way the process works, and the state law doesn't allow that. But we do have those, along with the urban reserve areas. Those will serve as starting points if we have the need to expand that urban area.
So you expect a letter from people?
No, we don't at all. We will be studying them independently. But since we can't take an application, what we simply said is send us a letter that your property is interested and ready, and we'll put it in our file.
Directed to? Who will go to?
Yeah.
Who will I direct it to?
Oh, to me, to Scott at the planning department. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, so how does the city council's decisions affect, your office? For example, this week, the city council approved of the moratorium for Leetah Valley and stopping development for the next year. How does that affect your plan in your office?
Not really very much at this point. It doesn't slow down. In fact, it increases the need for good planning in that area. And along with our counterparts at the city, we've agreed to a joint planning process for that area from 195 to I-90 and the entire West Plains corridor. That's something that will be more formalizing as we go forward. But we intend to look at potential land use out there and plan that together. One of the potential funding sources for that has been discussed, comes from kind of a joint relationship between the county commissioners and the city. So we think there's well, in the planning side, there's no reason to slow that down. The implementation, yes, the city's put a hold on that for a year. That could put more pressure on development wanting to push into the unincorporated county. But we'll just have to wait and see how that happens.
In 1990, we bought 28 acres by the Meade Airport. It was UR 3.5. And growth management came in, and my wife and I weren't really paying attention to the process, but all of a sudden administratively, it was outside the growth area and now is urban reserve. Okay, with that said, the process that determined that was purely administrative. And so my question today is, I'm in the green zone, I'm in the urban reserve, I haven't sent a letter yet. But what I want to know is, are these planners over here gonna be fair? Are they gonna need any input from me as a stakeholder, or do I wait and just see what happens?
One of the, well, first off, and not to avoid the question, none of our team was here when GMA started. And those rezonings happened typically because the state forced the county and the cities to do it. So that's how the zoning happens. The reason we have a public participation program and the reason we're trying to create this very robust approach is so that, unlike a land use action where something's gonna happen on a neighboring property, you get notified, people 400 feet or a quarter of a mile around, you get notified that here's the project, here's the public hearing, come and tell us what you think. That doesn't happen on a broad comprehensive plan. Sort of the obvious reason we can't notify 550,000 people every time a decision is made. However, if we have this approach to public participation where we're having these forums from time to time, working online and letting interested parties know, then anything that happens that could affect the project or could affect the area around you, you'll have access to upfront because it'll be readily available. It won't be all the way to the end. It's like, here, what do you think? You'll have a chance, everybody will have a chance to see what's happening at every stretch of it.
One of the things that I wanted to add was, the term rural was explained as, it doesn't fit my property. I have 40 mobile home neighbors, an airport, and a residential development. That's on 3 sides. North 40 is building 400 feet away next year. And I think the land was never farmed. It's basically gophers, noxious weeds, and pine cones. and I've maintained it very well for 34 years. And I'm just asking or finding out what's the best way to get some consideration like all my neighbors have had. So what do you think there?
Well, first off, I'm a graduate of the University of Minnesota, so Gophers are a friend of mine.
That's right.
Well, I guess what I would say is to stay in touch with us. Keep paying attention to our website, because we're going to turn our web into an interactive tool. Right now, it's a library. You can go there, you can see documents, you can leave us a note. We're gonna turn that into essentially a 24-hour public forum where people can come in whatever time of day they want. And there'll be videos. You'll be able to see things like this and be able to ask those questions very specifically. And then one of the team will be able to get back to you individually as well as through these potential forums.
Thank you.
Here and then there.
Okay, like this gentleman, we've got some urban reserve land also up on South Road. And we were under the assumption last year that because the absorption amounts were met inside the boundaries, we should apply with our land. And we did. And so are those getting consideration when the team goes to work that, hey, we've had these applications on these urban reserve lands? And then how do we get input to that unless you file an application?
You're in the mix for two reasons. One, if you send a letter in, it's in our file, but more importantly, you're already in an urban reserve area. Those are gonna be the first study areas that we will look at if the population projections show that we have to grow the urban growth areas. We're not at that point yet. And the urban growth area is not just the UGAs that are around the metro core, but are around Shealy and Lake and Fairway Heights, and Deer Park. There's hundreds and thousands of acres that were put into those UGA areas in the 90s when GMA was born. And they were left rural because, to best guess, nobody knew what they would be developing against. Those all have to be accounted for in this next cycle. And so the idea that if we're going to grow the UGA, it might be moving areas around rather than creating new areas. But still, if they'll likely go to urban reserve areas first, because that's where the infrastructure is, that's what we were planning to grow, our predecessors thought we were going to grow. So at the moment, you don't need to do anything except kind of pay attention to what we're doing. The UGA analysis will start kind of in earnest probably in October of this year. And so we'll be putting that up on the web, we'll be publicizing it through our steering committee of elected officials. So you'll start to see where that analysis is going somewhere in October.
Follow-up question with that, and we talked with the planning group via Zoom meetings or whatever it was, either it's COVID. And we're not opposed to the development out there in Rhinos area, which is kind of the last open areas on the south over development. And obviously it's growing, just that type of development. And the thing that me and my neighbor, when we talked about it, okay, we're not opposed to it, but what are we gonna do with roads? Because all you have to do is go a mile west of Regal and look at that. So I hear the capital improvement discussions and how we were making sure Regal wasn't a make sure that, we all know you go there a weekend, the soccer's happening, it's and so we've got Glenbrook's now that cumulative road. It's very busy, it's unsafe for longer or riding a bicycle. It needs, so what point out there in the planners' minds do you start asking developers to put into a kitty so that there's funds available, not wait 20 years and then go, hey, we've got to have better roads, and the traffic is triple.
It's a significant challenge for Spokane County. We don't currently use an impact fee. The city is adopting or is thinking of adopting those, especially in the Thorpe Granby neighborhood. But we don't currently use them. And because of the scale of development that happens here, which is relatively small scale, unlike the booming cities in the south, A development impact fee for a 20 acre or a 40 acre subdivision isn't gonna amount to much, and if it sits there for 20 years, it's not gonna be enough to build a road. So we have to think of other funding sources to make that happen, but that's why the capital facilities plan is linked into all of these plans. Development can't go somewhere if it can't be supported by sufficient capital facilities for growth, and that includes roads, water, sewer, fire, and other things. So there's a breaking factor on where some development can go, it just can't be accommodated. Regal is a great example, Regal's like the urban version of 195. It is a mess, and there's more development growing to the south, that's out in the Moran Prairie is going to be a growth area, and so Regal is gonna be a challenge for the next 20 years. But the point is, there's no magic bullet, but we are tying growth back to capital facilities in a deliberate legal way for probably the first time.
It's just as rural areas get impacted with urban zoning, which is what I thought is happening.
Right.
We're not seeing comparability in construction services, sidewalks and bike paths and things that are a half mile away. But yet we're being impacted with urban development densities.
Land development is, and has been a messy business. We're trying to get a better organizational plan for us and our future in this round. Yes, sir.
Sorry I came late, so I might have missed the answer to my question, but one of the statements of Spokane, the region is close to nature. How do you balance close in rural areas with basically the sprawl of growth? Because you have to balance, and this gentleman mentioned Glenrose. Glenrose is a rural area with animals, farms, the whole bit. And yet I know the developers are licking their chops, looking to expand into the Glenrose area. So how do you balance keeping that close to nature theme in Spokane with all this development that eventually just be urban sprawl over time? God help our grandchildren if they live in that sprawl.
We're actually really looking forward to that challenge. And part of it is what we said before, the tool we have today is capital facilities leakage. You have to be able to pay for this with that development area. The second thing, and what we hope to explore in the plan and translate into development regulations, is a new look at zoning. So that we're not getting simply a low density residential subdivision of 100 lots on 20 acres of land. But rather, we're starting to say we need to be building neighborhoods. We need to be building whole neighborhoods at these places and planning for those neighborhoods. So that they're not just row after row after row of street, but then you don't have to drive on the Regal to go get groceries. There may be small markets, there may be small areas in more of mixed uses that almost by definition support slightly higher densities rather than downtown densities, but can take, instead of a square mile being accommodated, you might be able to shrink that to a quarter of that land area and accommodate the same amount of population and still preserve some of the open space about it. So there are tools that have been used in other places. We're going to look seriously at that. Well, we're going to outline them for you and for our elected officials and see if there is general support for moving in that direction to add a community character element to our land division ordinance.
I'll commend you if you can hold to that line, because as we all know, we put in zoning regulations on certain areas, and all it takes is a developer with deep pockets to come in, and eventually that zoning is changed to meet their needs as opposed to the needs of the neighborhood.
I understand your criticism. I've been in this business more than 30 years.
I can show you that.
And one thing I've learned both in urban redevelopment and regional planning is if you show this kind of style of development and explain, and a developer has to be at least a little open-minded and say, look, here's a new way of thinking. If you do this, you can probably make more money than you could in your old system. And if you want to do this, you'll get your permits faster because you're meeting our requirements. If you want to fight me, you can do that, but it's going to slow you down. You may ultimately win, But we think if you do it this way, you actually can come out ahead on your own.
Are you referring to mixed use?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Essentially,
Thank you.
yes, over here.
So how is planning for public transportation coordinated in this process, or is it?
It's coordinated sort of peripherally right now. STA has a robust planning staff. Their planning director is very talented, good friend. And they are looking seriously at how they do their own route planning. We've been talking just in the last few months about how they've got a plan that's going in a 25 to 45 plan. It's like, Carl, can we move it into a 26 to 46? And they're like, well, we're too far along, we've got too many grants in here. It's like, okay, got that, but let's think about pulling this together in a different way so that as we plan for these developments. If we're looking at something that's going to have more of a slightly dense center. Now, and it's somewhere over here, where we can start thinking about how do we link transit to this place over a 5 or, God forbid, 20-year period, but put that in place early on, so we're not just doing transit planning on route extensions, but actually transit planning to reach areas that should be growing in slightly better than sprawl densities. It's an aspirational goal at this point. We're not there yet. Yes, ma'am.
You said you were going to try to tie capital facilities to the development of the project.
Yes.
Who is going to make up the list of those capital facilities for that area? Who determines what is going to be tied to?
Essentially, we do, through both planning, our public works staff, our engineering staff, our public safety staff. We're working more closely with our school districts than we have before. So that those will come in the sense that when an application comes in, it's reviewed by these agencies and we say, you need this, you need this, you need this, you need this. And then that goes back to them. And if they accept that, that's their contract on how they build.
So is the public allowed to have input into what they see as a missing part of that capital facility?
Currently, no, this is an administrative function. But it's also driven kind of by engineering and by law. There are not a lot of choices in that. The choices for the public are really upfront now in the comp plan of setting, what does this area look like? What do we think it should look like? And then we can let our technical staff figure out what size pipe do you need, how big does the road need to be, and make those things happen. But historically, the actual permitting process has not been one where we solicit public comment. We solicit agency comment in addition to ourselves.
Well, we have so many areas now where the roads are planned, the county owns the right of way, but the road was never completed.
Oh, there's probably
lot.
thousands of miles of unused right of way.
So that's why I'm wondering if those will be incorporated as part of this to make the development.
No ways to know at this point. Many of those are considered legally abandoned, but still remain mapped. Some of those date to the 1800s in very early class that were never realized, but they still exist as right of way. We don't have that level of detail in our planning program yet. When it comes down to very specific areas, if we find some of that area, we'll make recommendations on how to bring it up to modern standards. Yes, sir.
You had made a comment about moving into areas where there's general support. Do you mean public feedback? Do you mean opposition to growth, NIMBY? Is that taken into account?
It is taken into account. It is not usually a determining factor because the law tells us where you can and cannot develop. If somebody meets the requirements that are set out in statutes and in our code, then they generally have a right to develop in that area. If we do take public comment into consideration, and that can also help, it can help shape the style or quality of the project. If it's laid out in a very brutal way, we can have some input on how can you soften the edges? How can you make this better link to the existing neighborhood? How can it better fit with its neighbors? But if they meet the legal requirements to develop, no, they will have that right to develop.
So neighborhood opposition doesn't overrule property.
So. Neighborhood opposition is very important in the planning side of it. That's where we have a chance to set what's the character, style, and the development going to be in this area. Once that's in place, then we go back and say, how do we implement what that looks like? As we write development regs accordingly. Yes, sir, back.
I'll just relate to some of these previous questions. I live in country homes, and I was just curious in light of what you were saying about referring back to the population projections. What is the assumed, for lack of a better word, like carrying capacity of areas that the county oversees that are existing residential, like country homes or trailer? Because I imagine that as you calculate how much more land needs to be added to UGA or to reserve, that people aren't land. So what is the assumed density increase possible in country homes, and what is the assumed density increase of places that currently are just not in a zone residential area, if that makes any sense?
Sure, the, not every area is equal, of course, and one of the really most important tools that the county has is its critical areas ordinance. That looks at land suitability for development, and both on itself and in its proximate areas. And that drives how that plan is drawn up. It drives the potential densities for that plan. And it even drives where in fact you can build outside of buffer areas. So the carrying capacity is defined as two things. One is, what does the land itself tell us that it can handle, maybe three. And then what is the character of the land around it if we're going to develop it in something other than the natural state? Is it in truly large lot residential? Is it something that we could create a new neighborhood center? Is it something in between? And the last one is, of course, water and urban services. In parallel with the work we're doing on the comprehensive plan, we're also updating what's called the coordinated water service plan, which is all of the water providers in the county, cities, private, and others, to understand who has water rights, how much do they have, how much can they serve in their own areas, and do they have the carrying capacity? In other words, pipes and facilities to actually serve the water that they own. That plan hasn't been updated since 1991. So we're adding that to that for kind of that same reason. We can't accurately, or we can't credibly recommend growth in an area if we don't know if it's got water. Very beginning, very basic. Yeah, and then back here.
Do you know what services are available everywhere in this planning area? And
It's a little beyond me.
okay, do you know that we have a water line into our acres?
Personally, no. But
Okay, do you know that we have a engineered and permitted road into the property from Lane Parkway?
Okay.
You know that. So how can I get that message and information to the planners?
I think you just did. We can follow up.
Well, anyway, so this is not a joke,
Really,
really.
you take notes, so.
Again, I told you, we were surrounded by development. We like our open field, 34 years ago. But I'm really getting tired of maintaining open space for neighbors to throw their garbage, their weeds, their boards, their rocks they find, and then even come and hijack soil. Okay. I'm gonna write you a letter that's gonna detail all the services we have. And I'd like you to consider it. Of course, thank you.
Yes.
I want to be clear that you just said, I think, that if a piece of land has all the capital facilities, fire, water, school, all the rest, and is adjacent to sewer, that, and they agree that we can have sewer if we take it only either if you wait. Are you saying that if I have all the facilities, I have every right to be in the urban world? That's what I thought I heard you saying.
No, I'm saying those are conditions you would have to have likely to be considered for the urban growth area. The actual study of the urban growth area is going to be based again on what's available in those population areas. And then if additional land is needed to try to go to areas that are better positioned for it. If they're ready to have full urban services, that piece of land would be a prime candidate.
But you're saying it's still not clear that
There are no guarantees.
thank you. I thought you said something else.
Here and that over here.
I'm interested in one of the new challenges you have, as a result of 1181, I think, which is the vehicle miles traveled. Very simple problem, as I see it, is you can't reduce vehicle miles traveled unless you get more people to do it.
That's one solution.
It seems
Yeah.
like something that.
Right.
So what do you do to work with the only transit agency we have, SBA? How to make that possible?
Well, part of it, and this is more an answer from me as a personal planner than representing the county at this point. Part of it though is working with our urban partners. If downtown Spokane can get itself into having a really growing urban core of residential living, that's gonna take pressure off of some of the development pushing out to the edges. That helps the economics of everything, really. The county deals on the edges primarily, so we are limited. We're not going to build high-rise, we're not going to see high-rise development being built in those areas. Areas like near where Jim is, in that meat area, the North Meat area, yeah, that's an urbanizing area. That could densify a little bit and provide areas where people either don't have to drive as far or could even walk, doing some things like that. So our goal is chiefly to provide more amenities, more services in places that people don't have to go just into the core cities to find them. That's an economic argument, but if we put it out as there's a land incentive to do this, and then in that economic development strategy, maybe we could work with a company to say, or they would say, this doesn't pencil out, I can't put a convenience store here. It's like, well, okay, what if you put 5 of them and serve them out of one central distribution center? Can you do that? Oh, well, we didn't think of that. Sure. Now you've got a chance to put some things places that are economic that it might not work otherwise. So our side is focused not so much on getting people out of vehicles as is giving them a shorter trip and not to get things they need. Yes, sir.
When will the county know how much land it needs to add?
Best guess will be by the end of the year.
Any estimates at this point?
No.
It'd be reasonable that we grew 17% in 12 years, and we would need 17% more land. That is a reasonable way to look at it.
Well, it's a very simple, direct way to look at it. It doesn't quite work that way.
Okay, that's why I asked.
And just to remind you, I'm sure nobody really thinks about this. The urban growth area as it exists has this 1,600 acres that are currently zoned rural. Those have to be accounted for in our growth pattern before we can add new acreage to that. What that means is they may move around. We may not, if hypothetically our urban growth area is 50,000 acres. It may stay at 50,000 acres, but it might not look like that boundary. And the reason for that is the growth area was overestimated from the very beginning. And we haven't grown into it as much as we thought, and that's chiefly because we put a lot of land around our small towns. Go ahead.
You were just discussing Spokane, city of Spokane capacity and how that impacts your calculations for urban growth expansion. So I guess building opportunities in housing would inflate Spokane's capacity and therefore reduce the county's calculation for urban growth. Is that a true statement?
Sort of. If the city, the last time we went through this exercise was 2016, and the city overestimated what it could absorb in an infill development strategy. Pretty significantly. By doing that, though, it cut that number, it assigned that number to the city rather than the county or the other cities for growth. And that meant when you kind of ran out of land in certain areas, the city was sort of holding on to this chip. They have recognized that they overshot, and they're being very helpful working through this equation right now. But ever since then, they've also adopted more robust or more dense strategies for their infill. So they've actually got better tools now than they did 12 years ago for doing infill development. So the city likely can achieve a higher infill than they had in the past. Their challenge, and we've talked about this so they know it, is you can only take the South Hill, for example. if you're going to scrape a block that has 4 homes on it and put up a 24 unit project, the land will certainly handle that. You can do good urban design and architecture. Will your infrastructure support it? If the infrastructure was built for 1890s bungalows, can you put up 24 units of contemporary family, even small family housing and still use the pipe in the street? So that's another part of the analysis that the city specifically is looking at in their version. It's not something you think about. It's like, oh, sure, the land will hold a duplex or 4plex or 6plex, but will the infrastructure actually support it?
Similarly, similar to this question, is it true that the cost of increasing that infrastructure, so to speak, is lower within the existing UGA that the county has compared to going forwards? Like, I think that this South Hill is already relatively dense, but like there are areas going up well into the UGA where you could probably, I would think, increase the infrastructure capacity before you think about going beyond that.
If you can use the existing infrastructure with higher densities, that is far more cost effective than building an infrastructure. If you have to replace urban infrastructure, it is almost the opposite. Yeah. Tearing up, it's one thing to tear up the street in front of the 4 houses to put 24. Well, that's got to connect to this pipe, and that's got to connect to this pipe. And all of a sudden, you're all the way down to the intersection, running under Post Street Bridge. If that's the case, then you're better off building new infrastructure in areas that can support it. And then back to our goal, that's where we want to see those new areas be a little more like a small neighborhood than rather than just a row of houses. Anybody else? Thank you very much for. Anybody online wish to ask a question? Forgive me, I didn't see it on the screen over there. If you have something, please raise your hand. Well, we will be, we'll be back and we'll see you again one of these days. In the meantime, watch us online. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,